In 1066, William the Conqueror led his army across the English Channel to claim the English throne. On October that year, his army met the English army near the town of Hastings in what is now southeast England. It was here that one of the most important battles in English history took place. And if the English had won, the course of not just England's history, but maybe even our entire modern world, would be completely different. Before we get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed recently. We are rapidly approaching 100,000 subscribers, and none of that would have been possible without you guys. So thank you so much. Also, if you enjoy learning about ancient battles, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. In the year 1066, King Edward the Confessor of England died on January 3rd. He left no legitimate heirs, but there were three people who all believed they had a claim to the throne. These were William, Duke of Normandy, who was Edward's nephew; Harold Godwinson, Earl of Wessex, who was related to Edward by marriage; and Harold Hardrada, King of Norway. And when Edward the Confessor first became king, he actually named William his heir. But as time went on, he started having second thoughts. Part of this may have been because William was a foreigner and didn't really speak English, and part of it may have been because William and his wife Matilda had a terrible marriage, and Edward didn't want Matilda to become Queen of England. Whatever the reason, though, Edward ended up naming Harold Godwinson his heir instead. When Edward died, Harold became king, but both William and Harold Hardrada felt that they had a claim to the throne and decided to invade. Now Harold Hardrada was the first to arrive. In September, his fleet landed in northern England, where he defeated an English army at the Battle of Fulford Gate, then marched south and laid siege to the city of York. Harold, who at this point was in southern England, quickly marched north to intercept him. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge, the English utterly defeated and killed Harold Hardrada, ending the Norwegian threat to the English throne. Now, after dealing with the Norwegian, Harold turned his attention to William, who was currently in Normandy, preparing his invasion force. William had assembled a massive fleet that was by far the largest that had ever sailed across the English Channel. Once it was ready, he set sail for England and landed in the south on September 28th. Harold had barely had any time to regroup after his victory over the Norwegians, so he quickly marched his army south to confront William. On October 14th, the two armies met near the town of Hastings, in what is now southeast England. Here, the English army took up a defensive position on the top of a hill called Senlac Hill. The English army consisted of around 7,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry, while William's force was much larger, consisting of around 10,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle describes the English force as being composed of the best soldiers, and war was never waged more justly than on this occasion. That being said, the Chronicle also notes that the Normans greatly outnumbered the English. The plan was for Harold to hold out against William as long as possible, and then march on London and have himself crowned king. If he could successfully reach London, then even if William managed to land his troops in England, it would be very difficult for him to take the throne from Harold. And so the battle began. As was typical of the era, the armies started off by exchanging some light archery volleys, which was then followed by a cavalry charge. A small group of William's cavalry broke through the English lines, but they were soon forced back. This happened several times throughout the day, but each time the Normans charged, the English managed to hold them off. As the day wore on, though, the Normans started to push harder and harder, and eventually the English line broke and retreated to the top of Senlac Hill. Seeing this, Harold rallied his men and counterattacked. The English fought bravely, but it seems that the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle may be slightly biased. Despite the English bravery, it seems like neither side was able to gain much ground during the battle. That was until around 3 p.m. when Harold fell, according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. While the battle was at its height, an arrow was shot which hit Harold right between the eyes and killed him instantly. The text goes on to say that with Harold slain, every man's courage failed, and the battle was lost. With their king dead, the English broke and fled, while the Normans pursued them and slaughtered many of them. William had won the Battle of Hastings. In the aftermath of the battle, William went on to conquer England and became known as William the Conqueror. Under his rule, the Norman-French language replaced Anglo-Saxon as the language of the English court. French customs and institutions were adopted, and a large number of Normans were granted land in England, drastically changing the makeup of English society. It was also the beginning of the end for Anglo-Saxon England. While the English would continue to exist as a people and their language would live on in Middle English, England would never again be the same. Had Harold Godwinson lived, things could have played out very differently. Firstly, had Harold lived, it is entirely possible that he could have still defeated William. After all, despite being outnumbered, he did hold off William's forces for most of the day. Had he managed to defeat William, then the course of English history would be completely different. For one, the English language may have continued to thrive, and England would likely never have adopted French customs or institutions. Furthermore, William's claim to the English throne would have likely gone to his son, William, who at the time of the Battle of Hastings was only 5 years old. Had William the Conqueror died at Hastings, it is possible that England would have simply been ruled by a regency council until young William came of age. And if the English nobles were able to resist Norman influence during this time, then it is quite possible that England would have remained independent. If Harold had lived and defeated William, then his descendants would likely go on to rule England. And if this happened, it is possible that England might be a completely different country today. For example, had Harold beat William, then he would likely be remembered as a national hero. And the Battle of Hastings might be taught in English schools as an iconic moment in English history. Similarly, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, its a version of events, could be the dominant historical narrative, and Harold's legacy could be so positive that England might even be ruled by the descendants of Gyrth and Leofric, the two brothers who led the English army at Hastings. Furthermore, had Harold beaten William, then William's claim to the English throne would have likely been extinguished. This means that when Edward the Confessor died, the throne would likely have passed to someone else, possibly Edgar the Etheling, who was the closest relative of Edward's that didn't break with him. Edgar had become king and was able to defeat the Normans, then he may have been able to forge a union between the English kingdoms of Northumbria, Mercia, and Wessex. Had Edgar succeeded in uniting England, then England might have been strong enough to resist the Norman invasion. Also, let's not forget the alternative history we would have seen with Harold Hardrada becoming King of England. While ultimately he was defeated at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, had Harold been killed at Hastings, then William might have been less hesitant to allow Harold to invade. And if Harold Hardrada had become king, then Norse paganism would likely have become the state religion of England. Now obviously none of these things ended up happening, and William the Conqueror went on to become the first Norman king of England. But this just shows how much of a turning point the Battle of Hastings was in English history, and how much of a difference a single arrow could make. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to support us even further and get access to exclusive content, then consider becoming a patron. The link to that is provided below. This is your host, and I'll see you next time.